Welcome to episode 31, Created by Design. This episode is really a continuation of episode 30, where I started instructions for knitting Charlie the Chimpanzee from Louise Crowther's book, her wonderful little knitted animals, and this is the wild animal book that I'm working from. But of course, once you do a body, all the bodies are the same, the standard bodies for whatever critter you're going to make. And I'm showing you how to do it in the round. Her instructions are written for doing them in the flat. But when we ended the last episode, we cast on and I got us going into the round. This is my string. I will, my yarn, be closing up this little gap right here at the bottom, and it closes up real nicely. Do it with needle and thread, or just using this yarn to close it up with. So that'll close up nice and smooth. So as we've said before, one full going around one time is one complete row. And this is actually where I've started right here. My marker's right at this opening here. So now I am on row 17, which means I'm ready to knit in my legs. That's why we get our legs knitted and our arms knitted before we start the body, because they're going to be knitted right in. And when we look at row 17, if we were doing it in the flat, this would be a purl row. But because we're knitting in the round, it's a knit row. So when it says purl 20, we're really knitting 20. So I'm going to do that with you so you can see exactly how I knit these legs on. I've had a lot of requests for that. So I'll get myself started here. This is pretty self-explanatory as to how to knit 20, but I'm going to just do it with you so you can see exactly what I do. And once you get it down and get the feel for it, it actually is pretty easy. And I love doing it this way, not having to sew those arms and legs on, but just knitting them right into the body, because it is just so smooth and nice. So I'm going to knit across here my 20 stitches, and we're going to, if you were knitting it in the flat, you make then 10 purl stitches, and that's just, she's used those as a marker as to where you would later sew on your legs. Well, we're still going to do those 10 right at the 10 purl stitches. We're going to be actually knitting the leg in to where the pattern says 10 purl stitches. So we're going to get over here. I should probably stop and count and see how many I've done now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay, there's my 20 stitches, and now I'm ready to put the leg on. And just out of curiosity, I'm going to see if I have 10 stitches here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm going to put one more stitch, so it's the 10 stitches I'm working with to do the leg. So now there's my 10 stitches that we're going to be knitting this leg onto. And I need to get these stitches of the leg. Remember, we split half of them, but they're on two different yarns, and half of them are split already on two separate holding yarns, or stitch holders, or whatever you've got your live stitches onto. And excuse me, I'm going to now put these stitches actually onto another needle. So that's pretty easy to do. I'm going to disregard my yarn right here. I could go ahead and weave it in now, which is not a bad idea to do, or I could weave it in later. But you know, I actually like the idea of securing it in here right now. So I'm gonna stop the video long enough to run and get one of my needles. Okay, I took the time off camera to put my needle in, and I started to weave my end in here just to save us some time so the video doesn't get so terribly long. Right there. Now we are actually ready to knit these stitches in with our 10 stitches over here on this needle right here, and that'll be the first leg that goes on. And I'm just going to leave the needle off of these right here for right now because it just makes it a little easier to work with. So you're going to line up your 10 stitches here with the 10 stitches on this needle right here. As I said, these would in the pattern, these back here are the 10 purl. If we were purling, those would be your 10 purl stitches. But we're just going to keep going on around, but knitting in this leg as we go. So I'm just getting my needles positioned so that they're down here on the cable. I moved that one and I didn't need to. So the leg stitches and the body stitches that I'm going to knit together, I'm going to get right here to the end of my needle. Close by, I have my little tool. If these stitches get a little tight, sometimes this little tool or a crochet hook really works well to help pull those through. We're going to start out with the knitting needle and just see how easily that comes. Now, when you line this up, make sure that your foot is facing you because you don't want to get it knitted onto the body backwards. So make sure that you're working with your back 10 stitches, which would be half of your stitches divided on this leg, the other leg right here. It's the front half and the back half. So we're working with the back half of the stitches of this already knitted leg. And here we go. We're going to put them onto, knit them together for the body. And all of that is actually pretty easy. I'm just going to go ahead and use this needle we were already working with. And it's kind of almost like doing a 3-needle bind off without binding off. That's our first stitch. So I'll do it a little bit slower. I picked up the first stitch on this needle here. I'm going to pick up the first stitch on the back needle, bring my yarn through those two, so knitting them together actually, and slipping them off. So there's 2 of the 10 stitches right there. Just going to go on around to all 10 of these stitches. Now, if for some reason, and trust me, I actually have had this happen before, I get my legs done and I find that I have 1 stitch too many in my leg, and so I have an extra stitch, so it's not 10 and 10, it's like 10 and 11. I just take that 1 stitch and I make it go away by slipping it over the top of the stitch next to it, and no one will ever know that you had to get rid of a stitch, or you could choose to make a stitch. But in this case, I think it's actually best to get rid of a stitch instead of trying to make a stitch. But sometimes we have to do that. Sometimes we just get off a stitch no matter how careful we are. And as long as, if you're making a pattern design in your knitting, if that extra stitch or lack of a stitch doesn't make any difference to a design, then just slip it over another stitch and get rid of it. I think that's just part of learning some of the tricks of the trade. You can tear it out. Sometimes, oh my goodness, we have to tear it out if it's critical to a design or to fitting something, sometimes that little stitch can be super, super critical. And but don't be afraid of getting rid of a stitch when it's just not important. And some stitches aren't. Okay, anyhow, that's my opinion. Now, the back of my leg is all attached to the body. It's nice and tight. It looks good. And it's just gonna hang there while I finish row 17. And we're gonna knit on around to 4 stitches, and then we're gonna put the other leg on. So doing the very, very same thing. And I need to grab another needle right now because I got enough stitches on that one. So I'm going to knit my 4 stitches. Pattern says purl, but we're knitting. Just have to reverse that in your brain, but once you get in the habit of doing it, it comes pretty easy. And now I'm ready to put this other leg on. I don't think it's necessary for me to take up camera time to do that because it's just like this one. And then you're just going to finish knitting on around, finishing up row 17, and then go to row 18 and just do exactly as the pattern says. And I'm going to do that. I'll come back when I'm ready to start. I'll show you where I'm going to start the opening in the back for stuffing, but that's how easy it is. We'll come back around. Actually, you know what? I'm going to finish this row off camera because we come back around and I attach in this front part of the leg. So I will come back in just a second. I'm going to finish this off camera and I'll be right back and show you how to handle the front part of the leg. So when I come back, I'll actually have both legs attached. So that's going to be the best way to show you. I just finished knitting on my second leg. Those are the 10 stitches across the back of the leg. And we're still on row 17, and I'm going to knit to the end of that row. Now, mine went on pretty smooth. A couple of things to remember is you want to have nice tight tension at the beginning and the end of that 10 stitch where you're putting the leg on. Just get as nice and snug as you can, but don't overstretch your yarn. And it just will help when we do the next row. So this is finishing up row 17. I will say when I put on the second leg, because it's just a little bulkier because you've already got one leg on there, there was just a couple of pesky stitches that didn't want to come through on those, knitting those 2 stitches together. So no big deal, picked up my little tool and it just made it so simple. So don't be frustrated if you can't get those stitches knitted together. That little tool just solves the problem. You just use the crochet hook and get a hold of it and pull it through. So now we're ready to do row 18, and all the way from 18 through 37 is just completely knitting around. Well, on row 18 we have to knit in the front part of the leg, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Pretty easy to do. So just come around here. You don't really need to see me knit straight stitches, but I have to get over there to that leg, don't I? And of course, whenever I'm hurrying, things don't always go the same. Keep myself in the camera here, Linda. I don't do a very good job of that sometimes. I'm so sorry. I go back and think, oh no, and I should have edited it out, and I don't always catch it, but hopefully you understand I am not a professional, and honestly, knitting with your hands out in front of you is extremely awkward. Okay, I'm not quite up to the leg yet. get another needle. That's why I love having a double set of these flexi flips, because it gives me lots of needles to work with. And now this may drive somebody crazy having this flop around, but it doesn't me. So there again, I'm just encouraging you to find what works for you. And these work for me, so that's what I'm sticking with. And now we're up to our 10 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's the actual back of the leg. I'll have 10 stitches here. We're going to get these onto a needle, and we're going to be doing exactly the same thing, knitting these stitches with what's on my needle right here. And I'm going to actually shut the camera down so I can do this and not use up your time for me to pick up those stitches. I don't really think you need to see me do that. I'm on row 18. I've actually started row 18 and have knitted on this first leg, the front side. I went ahead and did that because I want you to be able to see what that totally looks like. It is completely closed up, and it's pretty simple to do. The intersection where they come together is nice and tight, and we're going to finish off this row 18. Well, look at that. I pulled my needle right out. So let me pick up those 4 stitches real quick, like, before I have a complete disaster. And we'll knit those. We'll get that done. No matter how hard we try to be perfect, you know, some days we just aren't. And I also closed up the little gap at the very bottom, and I'm going to show you how I did that. These are the 4 stitches, knitting them now that had slipped off my needle. Okay, so now I'm over to close up this second leg. Remembering we're on row 18, we're just knitting all the way around. I'm going to pick up that first stitch off of the needle that's closest to me, pick up that second stitch back here, knit them together. That's all we're doing, is knitting those 2 stitches together, slipping them both off of the needles. And now we'll do that next stitch. Pick up the front stitch off of the front needle, the first stitch off of the back needle, knit them together, slip them off of the needles, and there we go. And if this gets a little sticky, as far as, I shouldn't say sticky, maybe a little tricky, this is where I'll say it one more time, use your little crochet hook, repair tool, or whatever we call that thing, and use it to, I'll show you exactly what I do with it. If this was being hard to get into, I just take the point and slip it through the back needle, slip it through the back stitch, I mean, in the front stitch. The reason why I do it that way is because I want my hook up here to be able to grab the yarn and just pull it through. And honestly, you can do all of the stitches that way. You don't have to use the needle for any of it. You just have to get that stitch that was on the crochet hook onto your needle, and you could go all the way across. There's no reason why not to. You just want to make sure that you get keep your tension nice and snug when knitting across this here. So whatever works for you. But this is just like we did on the back side, but now we're working on the front side, and it goes really pretty quick. So I'm going to go all the way around and then continue up. It says row 18 through row 37 is stocking knit stitch, and just going around. in this case, stocking knit stitch would indicate that you're knitting a row, purling a row, but we're just doing all knit. And I'm going to do a number of rows, I don't know, maybe 12 rows, and then I'm going to make the opening, and I'll be coming back and showing you how I do that. But that's all there is to knitting these legs on, and it works really, really well. Very happy with that. Oh, I'll finish this off camera, but I wanted to show you the underneath side here. I just picked up those little stitches, bound them together, so close that little hole up, and it's nice and secure. Secured my yarn in here, and we're ready to continue on knitting. So have fun with that. I'm gonna be back in a little bit. Thank you. I now have knitted up through row 37, and I just wanted you to see with the body this far along how these legs are sitting, how they're just really nice and snug and tight in there. So I'm happy with that. And the reason why I decided to stop here at row 37 to add a little bit more video on, I think it's real critical to understand at row 38 how to do the CDD. I know I get some questions about why my stitches are not laying correctly or it doesn't look right, and I think it's because we don't get them picked up correctly. So I'm going to hopefully help us with that. And the first thing we do is knit one and then knit two together, and I just knit two, and I'm knit one, I'm going to knit two together now. There's my knit two together, and then we knit 17. So I'm going to do that with us. 2, 17. Okay, telling a story on myself. I've knitted for years, and I've knitted a number of garments, and every once in a while there would be a stitch that I needed to make, and I knew it wasn't laying correctly, but I was really uneducated at the time. Really learned to knit from my grandma, got me started, but I didn't have any real good instruction along the way. So what I learned was, as we say, by the seat of my pants. And so along the way, I discovered I really don't knit like a lot of people. I put my needle in from the right into the left, the back of my, I'm going in the back of my left-hand needle. But actually, a lot of people that knit continental really come up here and knit in this way and make their stitch. I just discovered that a few years ago, and I thought, that's why a lot of times in instructions, my stitch wasn't coming out like everybody else's. Now, mind you, this was before there was much YouTube or internet, didn't have a lot of help. And you know, when you're reading instructions, it's really hard to get the same concept as when you can watch somebody else do it. So I still knit this way, but there are times that I have to change up how I knit a stitch, and I specifically have to do that when it comes to doing the CDD, which is slip 2 stitches knitwise, knit 1, and then slip your 2 stitches over the top. Because if I were just going to do my typical way of knitting, slip 1, and then knit this next one and slip these 2 over the top, I will tell you the way the stitch lays will not look correct. Now, I could get by with that here on the body, but when it comes up to the head and you need a very, very specific stitch line that's running up the front of the face, for instance, and you'll know what I'm talking about if you've already knitted one of these heads. Okay, so in order to get those stitches correct, I have to actually take them off of the needle the way that they're probably supposed to be, which is coming around the front side, picking up, slipping, I should say, this first stitch, reaching over here from the left of the stitch and going in from this direction and slipping it off. And I'm going to do that with this second stitch right here. I just kind of got in there and made it relax a little bit. So there are my 2 slipped stitches. And now I'm going to knit this next stitch. And now we're going to take these 2 slipped stitches and I can do them one at a time or pick them up both together. I have not found that it really makes a difference if you slip them together or singular. Sometimes doing it singularly is a little easier. So I slipped the first one, and now I'm going to slip the second one over. And there is my 2 slipped stitches over the top of the knitted one. Let's do that again just so you can see it for those that have not done it. So we're going to slip, coming in from the left hand side of the stitch, coming into the stitch and slipping it off. That gives a little twist in the stitch, and you want that twist. And if it's kind of hard to get in there with your needle, just kind of stretch it just a tad bit. So I'm coming in from the left side over here of that stitch, putting my needle over, pointing to the right, and going through the stitch, slipping it off of the left hand needle. Now it's sitting. The 2 slip stitches are sitting over here on the right hand needle. I'm going to knit this next stitch. There's my knit. And now these 2 slipped stitches we want to slip over the top of the stitch we just knitted. So I'm going to knit a little ways further, and then I'm going to come back to the video and show you where I leave the opening in the back for stuffing, and then continuing on and get us up to where I put the arms in. I just finished knitting row 48, and I'm at the point that I want to start the opening for the back. And it's very simple to do, but I wanted to show you how I do it. We've just been knitting in the round, and now to make the opening, we are going to do a purl row back. And I'm going to just do that for a couple of inches. So all you do is just turn your work, and now we'll be purling back right over the row that we just finished, and it will begin our opening here. And like I say, I do about 2 inches, whatever you can comfortably feel like you can get your fingers in to stuff it. I do like to keep it down below the neck opening a little bit, but still close enough that I can get stuffing in the head and the neck area. So you can kind of experiment. What works for me may not work for you. You can raise that up or down. You can leave the whole back open if you want. I just prefer not to have to do a seam any bigger than I need to. So that's all I do, is just turn your work and purl back. And when we get back to the end of that row, which is B now, where the opening is, we'll just knit our way back around. So now we're knitting a row, purling a row, stocking knit stitch. So I just wanted to show you that simple step. And so I just keep following the pattern. I'm going to knit up to where I start get ready to sew or knit the arms in, and that's probably going to be about row 69 thereabouts, but I'll come back to the video when I'm at that point. I have now completed row 68 on the body. At about row 65, I started knitting in the round again. So my opening isn't 2 inches, it's about 1.5 inches, and that's plenty enough for me to get my stuffing in. So I started knitting in the round again, and I've actually knitted on row 69, which is a knit row, and I've knitted in the first half of my arm. I wanted you to see that, and honestly, it's just like knitting on how we did the leg. So you divide your stitches on the arm. I'm going to show you how I take these off, but I divided those stitches half and half onto 2 needles. And so here's my 2 needles. I've knitted the back side in already. This is the front side of the arm. And I decided on the chimpanzee, I was going to put the thumb going forward. So, you know, you can make it go backwards, you can make it go to the side. I'm really not sure that there's a wrong way, because we all can turn our hand whatever way. So on this one, I decided the thumb was going to go forward. I probably will make sure that when I do this side over here, that the thumb also is going forward, but you know what, there's no rules. We can kind of do this however we want. So I don't know that there is a right or wrong way, but I just wanted to show you that that looks just like when we knitted the leg on. So I've knitted across the chest here, and I'm getting ready to knit this arm on. I'm actually not going to sit here and do that with you, because if you watch the leg part, you can apply the same application to the arm. But what I do want to tell you is from the center of the back, where I started knitting in the round again, I went over 5 stitches and then I knit the arm on. So you just want your stitches half and half on 2 needles, and I went 5 stitches from the center back over, and that seems to work pretty good. I've done it 4, I've done it 5. The clothes seem to fit well there, and so I'm sticking with the 5 from the center back. So that's all there is to it. And then I'm going to continue knitting up through row 77. And 77 is a purl row. 76 is a decrease row. So I'll do that and do one more row, row 77, and then I leave all my needles. You can put them on stitch holders if you need your needles for another project. But I leave my needles on, live stitches sitting there, and then I'll go knitting the head, and then my needles are all in place to knit combine the head to the live stitches here. But you can put these stitches on a needle holder, or you can do a waste yarn, however you want to do that. But the body is almost done, and I'm going to do a little more detail on the video for the head. So that's why I'm not going to knit this arm in, because I think you can figure that out. But I did want to show you with the provisional cast on what we do. It's really pretty simple, but in case you've not, this was crocheted on. So you just want to find your little loop, and sometimes this comes off slick, and you just begin to pull that little chain that we made off. And then I would have my knitting needle right here ready to, you can see that first stitch, put it on the needle, pull a little bit more of my waste yarn, which happens to be the green, pull it through. Well, I actually have that loop over the needle, so that didn't pull off very well. So we'll try that again. So pull that waste yarn one stitch at a time. You can see that next stitch. I'm going to pick it up on my needle and just pull one little chain of the crochet out until I've picked up all these stitches. I'll put half onto 2 needles. And that's all there is to it. And then I'll be ready to knit this arm over here. As you can see, I've got the stuffing in. I do like the leg. I go down about ½ an inch from the top with my stuffing, and that's pretty simple. So I'm going to finish this up, and then I'm going to be starting the head. And I'll come back to the video when I get that head started. There's a few little things to remember with that, pretty simple. We're going to knit that head completely, and then I'm going to show you how I sew into the live stitches of the body onto what is the neck opening. Because most of these, if not all of the heads on this wild animal book, they're knitted from the back of the head to the front. On the other book, I think I've explained this before, the heads were started at the neck opening and up to the top, and that's quite different on here. So we can't actually knit the head into the body stitches, but we can sew them into the live stitches, and it turned out pretty well. So I'm going to walk you through that part of it. So for now, I'm going to turn the video back off and go back to knitting my little chimp. I hope everything's working out well for you on your project. So now we're ready to move forward, sitting at row 22, and it's where we start the intarsia. And it's where we do the color changes on the face, but we're working with all of them on the same row. If this was Fair Isle, we would be carrying the yarn over and securing it on the back side as we go. And what you get is actually a double layer. You've got your strand that you're knitting with and the color you're carrying over to work with, but they're small motifs. So when you get to where we've got a lot of stitches in between color changes, doing it by the intarsia method, it just makes sense. And so I've already knitted over the 23 stitches on row 22. So my gray yarn is sitting right here. And now I'm ready to start working with the light tan. And you can just start knitting with it and leave the end dangling and go back and secure it. But if you want to kind of clean up the mess before you get there, you can take your yarn, the new color, and weave it in on the back side for a few stitches just to secure it. Now I'm just picking up the purl bump here on the back just for, I don't know, maybe about an inch or so. And there we are. Take my needle off, and I'm going to tug on that. So this, you'll see it here. I'm tugging on it. So see, my end is coming. I don't want to see much of that end, just like that, okay? So now when I go to knit with the light tan, it's not dangling down here, and it's going to let me securely attach it when I start knitting. It'll keep you from having a hole there where you bring in the new color. So how do we secure that? Well, the gray is the one that we were just knitting with, and I want to lay that right up against the back side of my needle, and I'm going to pick up my new yarn to start knitting with, and this will make more sense when we come back and do the next row. But I'm going to make sure that this yarn is between. I'm not doing any twisting. I'm just making sure that it lays, here's my needle, here's the yarn we were just knitting with, here's my new yarn, and so the gray gets caught right between it, and that's going to help secure it. So now I'm knitting 6 stitches in the tan. 2, 3, 4, needle up. Whoops. 5, 6. Okay, now we're going to go back to gray, and we're not going to take the gray that we were using here. That will be too thick, too long of a carryover. So this is where we're actually going to get another ball of gray yarn. I have a little one right here, and I'm going to start knitting with it. And I could just start knitting. I'm gonna show you what happens. It won't be connected. These two, the light tan and this, will not be connected. So what I've found, and I've done that and gone back afterwards and woven the ends in, but I actually like this method right here that I'm doing, which is securing this yarn before we start knitting with it. So just like I did with the tan, I'm gonna secure the gray first, and I'm just picking up the purl bump of the row that we're gonna knit into. It'll never be seen, doesn't show from the front side, and just do a few stitches there. I'm going to tug on that so I get rid of this long tail. I mean, you could leave it there, but my point is to kind of clean things up a little bit. And I'm not going to pull it all the way through, but it's just sitting right there. So now I'm ready to go back, and with A it says to knit 6 stitches. So before I start knitting though, here's the tan that I was just knitting with, and I want to lay that up against my needle. I want to catch it between the needle and this gray right here. So we're just going to lay that on there. Don't twist anything. And I'm back knitting with the gray, and we're knitting 6 stitches. 4, 5, 6. And now we are back to 6 stitches of the tan. And yes, we are going to find a new ball of tan, and I'm going to kind of untangle my work as I go, because I find that kind of is helpful if you just stop for a second, kind of untangle, because it will be tangled. That's just a given. Okay, here's our new ball of tan. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to feed it through there so it's secure for that first row. And I'm going to, if you didn't catch the fact that here's where we just quit knitting with the rust, or this, the gray, and this is where the light tan will start. So I'm going to weave my color in from the left, from over here, this way. In other words, I'm going to weave it in over the area we just knitted. Once you actually do this, you will see why we're doing it. And it actually does help keep your yarn a little neater, keep things in order, and not quite so messy. Now this is optional, what I'm showing you here, to weave these ends in before you start knitting with them. You do not have to do this. I find that it is a nice, clean way. Now I'm pulling it so I don't have all this hanging here. I could just clip it off, you know, but I'm just tugging it up here to where it's close to where I want it to be. And there we go. Now we're ready to start knitting with the gray again. And I can't use the one I was just knitting with. I'm going to do 6 stitches I'm not knitting with the gray, excuse me. I'm knitting with the tan. And I want to make sure that my dark gray is laying right here. That's going to get caught in between the tan and the needle. And I'm going to knit 6 tan stitches. I think that's what my pattern says here. Yep, knit 6 stitches. Five, 6. And now we are going to go back to doing another ball. See how this can get messy, and why I am suggesting to weave these little ends in, and that's going to be 23 stitches that we're going to now be knitting to end that row. First row of color of intarsia. So I'm gonna, and so the whole face you're going to be, as long as we're using the tan, and the rest of the head is with using the tan and the gray, you're going to have all of this yarn hanging off of the back. And that's why my suggestion is to eliminate as much of these ends dangling back there. It's such a small little space. Like when I've knitted intarsia for like a sweater, you know, that's a much bigger area you're working with, and so not so important right away to tuck all these little ends in, but you know, it's helpful on this. And the nice thing about this sheep geese yarn that I'm using is that there's just enough fiber in it that it's not slick, and so the yarn, when I weave it in there, it holds nice and snug. It's not going anywhere. So now I'm knitting the 23 stitches to the end, and then we're going to come back and we're going to purl. And I'm going to try to do this quickly because I want to come back and do that purl row so you can just get a better look as to what is actually happening. And there's no increases or anything on this row 22. And 23, there's no increases. It's just adding the color. So we'll speed this along here. In fact, I'm actually gonna stop the video so we don't spend time knitting. Okay, I just finished row 22 and I started row 23, which is purl 22 stitches. So I've purled the 22 stitches, and now it is purl 8, and I'm going to purl 8 with the tan. So now you can just kind of see what happens to the yarn here, right? It does get all tangled, and so giving yourself a lot of space, maybe doing this, you know, up where you're at a table so you can actually kind of see where your yarn is sitting for just this little section. You know, my first favorite place to knit is in my recliner chair, but sometimes, like when you've got all of this, sometimes I move over to a table just because it's easier to kind of make sure everything's kind of hanging in the right order. All right, so I'm going to do that demonstration of how the yarn that we were just knitting with, this is my live charcoal yarn, and I lay it across my needle here. This is the next color that I want to work with. So I just pick it up and I make sure that my yarn that I was just working with is laying between my new yarn and the needle. No twisting. You don't want to twist, just lay it there and it's going to get caught beautifully. Now we are actually purling 8 stitches. So this is my purl 8 with the tan. and I kind of stop, snug up the charcoal to make sure that stitch that we just ended with is nice and snug. Make sure these new stitches out of the tan are nice and snug, and you'll have no problems. So let's do those 8 out of the tan. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's our 8 out of the tan. And now we go back to the charcoal. Make sure you've got the charcoal for the right ball that's right here in this next section. So once again, I'm laying my tan right up against the needle, pick up my new yarn, and that will automatically catch that yarn you were just knitting with. And this is a purl 4. 1, 2. I'm going to stop and snug that tan stitch, that last stitch. Make sure the first one of the gray is nice and snug. 3, 4. Okay, there's my 4. That's the 4 stitches right. We're right here at the center of the forehead here on the chimp. And now we are going to purl 8 in the tan. So once again, laying my yarn I was just working with, that's the whole secret, is laying it, just lay it flat. No twisting. Pick up the appropriate tan strand, and now we are purling 8. And I just don't go too far, because you can see where I've got looseness right there. I want to take that out. So I just snug, make sure that first tan stitch is nice and snug. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now we're going to transition again over to charcoal. You'll get tired of hearing me say this, but there's my tan. Here's my new section for the gray. Pick it up, and I'm just going to do like a couple of stitches and do the snug, snug, and finish purling across that row, and I think that's 22 stitches. And before I finish that, I'll turn this around so you can see all of that. The tension is pretty consistent and even, and that's what you want to watch for. This is where you could get some big long loose stitches and you don't discover it till you are through with the face, and then it's like, oh no, how do I get those big stitches tightened back up? Well, it's almost impossible. So if you do it as you go along, snugging those stitches up where those transitions are, you will save yourself a lot of headache. And that's just my secret for taking your time and snug those stitches. Don't assume that they're okay. Stop and look at your work in this intarsia, and you'll be very happy with it, and then discover, oh, that really was easier than what I thought. So I'm going to stop the video here. I'm going to finish working on the head and see, once again, because we finished a row and turned, we have all of these little tangle, but this is where I will untangle it before I go back and finish knitting the next row of the head. It just will save a lot of frustration if that's one of the things you do along the way. So there you go, and I'll be back in a bit after I have done a little bit more on the head. I have finished knitting the head of the chimpanzee. You can see down in here all of my loose ends that I need to weave in. I did go so far as to, this is where we finished. This is the end where we started. This is where we finished. And I did take my yarn that I was working with and I fed it through my live stitches when I took the needle out. So I've gathered up that. Now the next thing I will be doing after I secure all my loose ends in here is I'm going to save this end right here where I was knitting with to use to sew up this part of the muzzle on the underneath, on what would be the chin, underneath the chin of the chimpanzee, because that matches color. And here at the color change, I have the yarn that I ended up with. It actually is over here on this side. This over here is, wouldn't you know, there was a knot in my yarn, and so I had to add a new piece of yarn in, but I'll weave that in. So this is my long strand that I left, and I'm going to use that to sew up the neck here, finish the neck. I'm going to come back here and tuck these yarns in, secure them, and I have a long piece right here that I will use to finish closing up where we started. This is our cast on stitches, and I'll close that up. I'll just run my yarn through there, tug it up nice and tight, and I will sew up just a little portion of this. Then I will be leaving a section of this where the neck would be. I'll kind of judge where that should be, probably right about in there, and it's going to match up with the body live stitches that I have here. And I will I'll probably do this on the video. So I'm not going to talk about it very much, but I'm actually going to be sewing into catching these live stitches here as I sew this part of the neck. So I do want to show you how I do that. So I will be finishing up some of this stitching, but I just wanted you to see the head before I start stuffing and doing that. There really wasn't a whole lot more to show you on the video as I was knitting, because everything you've done, this is the CDD stitches in here. We've made those on the body, so that shouldn't be too strange. And so this really was a pretty simple head. If you just follow her pattern, it should come out really well. So got some tidying up those loose ends, and then I wanted to show you, and so you could get all prepared. This is what I do for the neck. Now I've been reading on the Facebook site that some people are using straws, some people are using foam hair curlers. All of that's wonderful. Do what works for you. I just happen to have some of this batting, and I discovered that if I just cut a chunk off, and I don't know, you could go 3-4 inches in length and roll it up tight, and I just take a good old, I did this in black so you could see it, some thread, and I could have done one more loop down here, but I stick it so that it's halfway into the body and halfway up the head, and I'll sew the head on first, and then I'll stick this in as I'm putting some stuffing in the head. So I will show you that process, but you might want to get this all ready. And so whatever you're going to choose. The only thing I've wondered about a straw, if it's a flexible straw, if that, and maybe it won't happen. I could just see where a straw, if it got bent real tight, you know, you could get a bend in that straw. So I wonder long term, and maybe there's enough stuffing around that that's not an issue. So that's the only thing I think I would be curious long term, how well a straw works, and it probably would have a lot to do with what age the child is that might be playing with our little critter. So it may be just perfect. But whatever you want to use, but putting that something in the neck will keep that head from being floppy. So I think that's been a good and successful thing. I did get one ear made. I just wanted to test it out to see if there was anything I needed to share with you. If there was some difficult part about it, there really isn't. You're going to knit it in the flat. You get it off of your needle. There's a little seam right back here that you sew up, and then it'll be ready after the head is stuffed and all attached. Then I will put the ear on, decide where I want that ear to sit. I think the ears give them a lot of personality, so that's why I think for me, I'll do it after the head's all stuffed and sewn on to the critter. So I just was trying to think if there was anything else about this head. It's probably one of the easier heads to do, actually. But I'm going to go back, get all my stuff secured, my ends, and come back when I'm ready to sew it on here so you can see that happening. And then how we go about doing some of the stuffing. So there you go. I now have put some stuffing in the body. Certainly I'm going to be putting more. Haven't put it up too tight up here at the top, but I have gotten the body fairly well stuffed. It will get some more. I've put some in the head, so I'm making progress here. But there was a couple of things that I thought I do want to show you, because I have had some questions about how do I sew it together? What do you sew into? And here's a really good place to show that, where this muzzle comes together. What do you pick up? So for me, I find the purl bump and I put my needle into it. And I should say I've gone around this opening here. I've gone through that twice. So there's a double row of my yarn where those live stitches were, just to give it some stability there. So here's my yarn coming off from that, and I'm going to pick up, if you can see this, that purl bump. That's what I'm calling it anyhow. It's where you go around the end of the needle or the end of the row. But I just pick up, you can see if you roll out your seam sideways, you can see the little bump. That's what I'm going into. I don't take a deeper bite, and I'll pick it up there on this left side, and then I go right across from it on the other side, and I pick up that little purl bump. Sometimes you have to encourage your little needle to go through it, but I'm just picking up the stitch itself. I'm not picking up two stitches, I'm just picking up that little bump. And it just pulls that seam nice and snug. Now I go back across to the other side, pick up that little bump, and sometimes you kind of have to use your imagination to find it. Okay, there's that little bump. All right, and now we're going to go back to the other side and pick the next one up. I don't skip any. And when you tug that together, it just pulls that seam together nice and smooth. Now we'll pick up the next one on the opposite side. So I'm just going back and forth opposite sides. And here's the next one. Pretty simple to do, but I know sometimes you look at that and you think, oh, what am I going to sew into? Do I pick up, a full row? Do I make a salvage edge? What do I do? And I use this method for sewing together a lot of things, because it really does make a nice smooth seam. So I'm going to do that all the way down, and you can see it just brings it up nice together. Here in the back, you can see where I've done the back of the head here, did the same thing, and it just there's no opening there. It doesn't separate. It's just nice and snug together. So I will continue to do that to the muzzle, up to the point that I'm going to be fastening the head on, and I'm going to try to do that on camera so you can at least kind of see for a few stitches how these two are going to mesh up together. So I'll continue to work on that. One very important thing I forgot to mention to you. It's very important to go back and read your patterns sometimes. And I almost missed where the instruction tells us to put a enforcing run on the inside. I'm having a hard time saying what I want to say. To run a piece of yarn right around this edge of the muzzle. And she talks about it on page 113. And what a great idea, because I can already tell that when you get this all stuffed, the idea is these two pieces of yarn, the ends are right here, excuse me, and right here. And once your stuffing is in there, we'll be able to pull on these two ends of yarn, and it runs right around here, this part of the muzzle, so that it helps shape that muzzle. I can tell that's a terrific idea to help give these heads some more definition on this muzzle. So don't forget to do that. I almost missed it. And I thought, I should really go back and read the pattern in a little more thorough when she's talking about finishing up on these heads. And I was trying to figure out if she gave a little more instruction as to where the neck should sit. She doesn't really give a defined, and it's kind of hard actually to give a defined where you're going to sit. Of course, if you're doing the head the way she has you do it, it's all closed up. This is all closed up, and you sew the two together. Well, we're not doing it that way. And so I'm having to figure that out, but I can tell you it's pretty much going to fit right here, close to where the end of the tan on the muzzle ends. And however many stitches, I'm going to pick them up on a needle. I'll come back in a minute and show you that. And that's where these two are going to meet up. But I'm figuring it out as I go here along with you, but it's pretty much going to sit in this position right here, just at the end of the muzzle. But don't forget to put that running yarn. I just picked up the purl bumps all the way through this area so that can be snugged down after the stuffing is in there, just to help give it definition. So I didn't want you to miss that part, because I almost did. Okay, I've got to the point that I've actually put some stuffing in the head. I've got my needles on the neck going in the same direction as the needles on the back where the seam is going to be. So they're all laying in the same direction. I think the last pictures we were taking, I had these needles cross this way. Well, they need to be in the same direction that the seam is on the head. And so I've actually, I said I had 19 stitches here. I have 18. I want an even number on the head as I do on the shoulders, so I made it to be 18. And now what I'm doing, and I don't know if this is going to come across very well in the video, but I've picked up like where the purl bump was, and then in between the purl bumps, in order to have enough stitches to pick up. And here is my yarn that I was sewing the head together with, and I've picked up a live stitch off of the head. Well, this isn't a live stitch, this is the seam edge. So I've picked up a stitch there, and now I'm ready to actually take the next stitch on the neck, which is this end one right here, and put my needle through it. So I'm not doing the Kitchener stitch. You could right here if you wanted to. I don't know that it's necessary, but once I have my yarn through that stitch, I take it off of the needle, one stitch at a time. And then I snug it up. Then I come back over here and I get the next stitch on this needle that's on the actual head itself. And once I know and this is kind of tricky, isn't it? Once I know I've got that stitch, my thread and my yarn through it, then I slip it off of the needle, and now I'm going to go back over here to this needle, kind of like, it's not a 3-needle bind off. Well, I guess in a way it is 1, 2, and then the needle I'm sewing through with, but it is kind of that way, except I'm not knitting any 2 stitches together. I'm just going through it, snugging it up. As soon as I have it, I take it off of that needle, snug it up, and when we get the stuffing in, this edge right here is it just goes away, that seam edge where you put your neck on to the shoulders. So I'm going to go all the way around. That's all there is to it. And then I've still got this opening, and I have the stuffing, this neck stuffing piece, to put right up through there. I can get my finger in there to put this in, still room to get more stuffing up here in the head. And that's really all there is to it. And then we'll come back and I'll sew this up. So I hope I haven't created a lot of questions for you. I hope I've given you some additional ideas as to how this head can go on in order to get this stuffing in the neck. And I suspect there's more than one way to pick up some stitches. You could use a crochet hook, all kinds of things. Figure out what, as I've said so frequently, figure out what works for you and then do that. This seems to work for me okay. Little fiddly right here, but it once you get a good picture in your head as to what you're doing, it'll come together. And then, if I can turn this without, I've left my yarn out that goes around the muzzle. I will snug it down and then weave these ends into the head, so that'll all go away. And he's kind of looking cute, and we'll get some eyes on him. I do have more stuffing though that I want to get in the head to make it nice and firm, and of course there'll be more stuffing up here in the body. So we're just about done. Okay, I have completely sewn those stitches together all the way around. I still have all my little end strings, and I've actually taken my little stuffing tube of batting and I've pushed it up in that opening of the neck. I used my little tool to put my needle in it and push it up in there good and tight where I want it to be. That head is going to be nice. It's got movement, but it's not wobbly at all. So I have yarn to secure, but I know that I need a little more stuffing in here around the shoulders, and I left that open to just show you. Not be afraid to just get in there and with your fingers push it around. That's why I do like this poly fiber, because it is soft and yet you can stuff it pretty tight. It's amazing how much stuffing we can get in these little critters. But I just use my finger, just keep pushing in there. There's no right or wrong. Kind of, keep their heads in alignment. He needs more here in his chest, so that's easy to do. And I think the secret with any stuffing is little pieces at a time. Don't try to get a whole bunch at one time. And so I'm just working my way around that neck piece that I put in there, and I just gave it a little tug to put it up a little bit higher. And this is all to your feel, how you like. How much do we want to have a bigger chest? You can just kind of keep stuffing. The other reason why I do like this Sheep G's yarn is it's pretty durable. It is nice to work with, and yet it's firm enough to hold a good tight knitting, so you can push up against it really good without it opening up and coming apart. I did my first animal, I think I've told this before, prototype to see if I was going to like working with him, and I did it out of wool. Well, he's really, really cute. I used Jameson and Smith just because I had a bunch of it, and he's really cute, but he is a completely different feel, much softer, couldn't get as strong of you know, knit unless I'd gone way down on the knitting needle size, which I didn't do. And so he'll always stay at my house. He's not going to be terribly kid-friendly being all wool, because it's not, you know, it's not a pre-washable wool. But I learned a lot from doing that out of the wool, that a cotton blend, I don't like to work with 100% cotton, but a cotton blend this is nice, and so I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm just going to keep putting a little more in his body so he doesn't look quite so skinny, and then when I'm happy with it, I'm going to sew this up, and probably the last thing I'll do is play around with this head, you know, move some of the stuffing around to make sure it's right where I want it to be before I snug that muzzle down, which is these two strings right here. I'll pull, and it's just, I can tell you now, it's just going to tuck that muzzle so it has more definition to it. And then we'll get some eyes on him, and I'll be having a last picture of him. I have started working, almost done with his clothes, so I've got the little hooded jacket done and his little cargo breeches. I'm working on the t-shirt right now, and then I still have the tennis shoes to do. But I've been working on this in between when I had time to get a video done, so I've kind of been doing all of this at one time. And then of course we'll get ears, and that's just what's going to make him scream chimpanzee, right? And I think they kind of go more here to the side, but I think he's awfully cute. I hope you've enjoyed this, seeing me do some of this by the seat of my britches. This has been quite a long and lengthy video, but it's been fun to do one from start to finish. Now, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I think this is one of the easier heads to do, and I'm not going to make a video of each one of them, but once you get that CDD stitch down and you're doing the slip knit, SSK, slip stitch knit, and the knit two together, once you have it in your brain which direction you're going into the front or the back of the stitch to knit with, and then there's a make one right and a make one left, those are really critical to the head. And that's where I think some are kind of running into a little difficulty, saying your snout muzzle hasn't come out right, and some of those other heads are more complicated than this one. So this is a good one actually to start with. So I'm anxious to get this one finished up. There you go. So thank you for joining me on this video project of knitting the chimp and all the little process. I don't claim to be a professional, just enjoy what I'm doing. I hope my hints and things that I've done have helped you. I've gotten so many nice comments and responses from everybody, and some really good questions. So thank you for all of that. And if you like this video, please hit like, and feel free to share on Facebook or on YouTube. I appreciate that. So thank you, and I'm sure there'll be another video down the road here shortly. Thanks so much for joining me. Bye now.